Welcome to Widow Too Soon. This is Michelle Bader Ebersole. I'm excited to come back today with another guest episode. I know you guys have been enjoying a ton of them because I have like 6 or 7 already recorded before this one today that have not gone out, which is so great. Thank you guys for volunteering and sharing your stories because everybody has a story and we can all learn from each other. So I'm just going to dive right into this today. So I'm sitting down with Michael Chapman. How are you today, Michael?
I'm doing great, Michelle. How about you?
I'm pretty good. So tell me, I don't even know this. I don't look at a lot of information before we start. Like, where do you live?
I am in Ellery, South Carolina, which is
Okay.
about halfway between Columbia and Charleston, about an hour and some change from the coast. So I'm
Okay.
out in
That's
a
a state
very
I've
rural area.
Okay, I've never been to South Carolina. I went to North Carolina this past summer. That was awesome going to a conference out there in Charlotte, but I have never been to South Carolina. Did you grow up in that area?
I did. I grew up in a town about 20 miles from where I am.
Okay, so now the accent makes sense. You've got a southern accent. Yeah, so that makes sense in South Carolina. That's awesome. Well, you have a big story. So I just want to, I mean, everyone's story is important, but you have what might be a longer story. So I want to get right into this. I'm excited to learn along with everybody else about you and what you've been through. And you wrote a book we'll talk about. So we've got a lot to talk about today. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's go back in time and tell me about your first wife and like how you met her, your love story, all that stuff. I love hearing that.
Okay, well, my first wife's name was April, and she and I actually met when we were children. We
Oh,
grew up
I love it.
in the same church together. Probably around the preteen years is when we became pretty
Hmm.
good friends. When we would do church trips and anything that involved the church, we were together there and pretty much inseparable. But we
Oh,
never, even through our preteen and teen years, we never did date. We were all
yeah.
just we were just really good friends. And in fact, what's ironic is she always kind of had a boyfriend through those years. So we just remained friends for probably up until when we got into our early 20s, and that's when we finally got back to where okay, now it's time to see where this might go, and it did.
Right.
Along the way, there were a couple of delays.
Yeah.
Once we got out of high school, I ended up going to Florida and kept in touch when I was down there. And she was dating someone at the time. And then I was made aware that she was no longer with that person anymore, and it was getting close to the time frame that I was going to finish school, move back home. So I called her one night and we were catching up, and I said, "Hey, all these years have gone by, and we've kind of talked about it. I said maybe when I get back, maybe you and I can go on that first date that we've never really gone on,"
Aw.
which she was very interested in doing. And so
Yeah.
I got back home after finishing school. I got busy, started a career, was still going and doing things with my friends. And all of a
Hmm.
sudden, I kind of forgot about that date. A mutual friend of ours got in touch with me, and she said, "I don't know if you know this, but April's seeing someone."
Aw.
I said, "Yeah, I kind of didn't follow through on that promise I made." She was seeing someone for a while. I was still pretty much single. Then some time went by. Same mutual friend got in touch with me and said, "Hey, she's single again."
I love
I
it.
thought, okay, now's the time. Now's the time. I can't keep delaying this. So we had that inevitable first date. We started seeing one another, and before you knew it, we were involved in a relationship that really worked good for us both. I think it had just been a long time coming, and the timing on it just needed to be what it was. And so
Right.
about a year into the relationship, I was walking around outside one day and I walked by her car and she had a convertible and the top was down. And I kind of glanced over and saw in the back seat there was an issue of Brides magazine on the back seat. So,
Yes.
it
Those used
was
to
like,
be really popular. Uh-huh.
yeah, she's thinking about it. And so I think it was Christmas time of 98. I went and got a ring and asked her to marry me.
Aw, sweet.
And we were married in December of 99. We had spent the previous 6 months building a house together, which I'm still in. The house has changed a little bit since then because It's part of a lot of things that have happened since '99.
Right.
But
Right.
we got 10 years together, plus 2 years of dating. So she was my girlfriend and wife for 12 years.
Mm.
Kind of how we
So,
began.
yeah. And did you guys have kids together?
We did not. In the
Not.
beginning, we were kind of okay without it. We were
Yeah.
what we considered dinks, double income, no kids. So we were able to
Right.
travel, take trips, and just have our time. And then, I don't know, we were a few years into marriage and she was really starting to feel that desire to have children. And we tried at different times and it just never happened.
Yeah.
Of course, in the end, when she was in her final days, we did have a conversation about that. But we didn't. We were without children, and I was kind of like on the fence with it. I would have
Yeah.
been fine, had we had a child, or I was still of the mindset of, well, you know what, if it's supposed to happen, it will.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when I look back on it, I'm like, well, maybe it didn't because of a certain reason.
So, what was life like? Did you guys travel? What were you guys doing for work? Like, what was your married life like?
Well, my schooling was on marine industry training, and I worked for
Okay.
boat dealers for a while. And then in 2002, I started my own business, and it is 400 feet from my house across my yard on my property. So I've got a short
Nice.
commute to work every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
April got a paralegal degree, and she worked for an attorney
Okay.
for a while doing that. She worked for her dad for a couple of years. He had a surveying company, and her final job was for the electric cooperative here, working as a customer service representative. So she did a
Yeah.
couple of different things during our marriage.
Yeah. And what did you guys like to do for fun? Like, what was like a weekend like?
Well, we spent a lot of time at the beach. Her dad had a
Oh, okay.
place over at North Myrtle Beach, so we would go there. We'd like to go to the mountains. And I got involved in 2002. I started racing boats because it was something that I grew up with my dad doing. So she would travel with me when we would go to boat races. She was always a big supporter of that. And we would go see family. One time we flew to Maryland for a wedding. It was a situation where we just had that freedom and liberty and ability, and we would go spur of the moment trips.
Yeah.
Banks, North Carolina, which is a beautiful place to go. Got a good memory from an anniversary trip there. So
Yeah.
like that. Had a pretty quiet
Yeah.
home.
Nice. And so tell me about when life changed for you guys.
Well, it was in the beginning of 2009 was when April started experiencing what was originally diagnosed by a regular practicing doctor as vertigo. She would have these
Okay.
lightheaded and dizzy sensations, and of course, she went to a general practitioner, and he thought she had vertigo and gave her medicine for that. Well, after about a week or two, it was not doing any good. Then she went to another specialist for ear, nose, and throat. He also thought she had vertigo, and she did not. So when she came home one day and she's like, "I'm not feeling any differently from what I was before they've been medicating me for vertigo." And I said, "Well, what we need to do is go back to the original doctor and maybe get him to take some blood and see
Yeah.
what your levels." So we did that. Her hemoglobin levels were really low at the time, like pushing
Oh,
dangerously low. So that would explain the sensation she was feeling. So
yeah.
the very next morning, after getting after the blood test results back, we were sent to Lexington Medical Center, which is about an hour north of us, and she was set up to see a hematologist who was also an oncologist, and they had to give her some blood. And when he came in to have a consultation with her, he said, "Look, I think you've got some things going on. We got to find out where your blood went." And so she had appointment scheduled for a PET scan.
Yeah.
She had that, and her diagnosis was she had stage 4 already metastatic melanoma.
Oh my goodness.
And what that was a result from, in 1996, she had gotten a melanoma dermally on the top of her skin from tanning bed. They said it was caused by a tanning bed. Back then, they removed it and some scar tissue. And she would go back in every 6 months for a visual examination and then graduated to a
Yeah.
1 year examination. And then from there, everything was kind of normal for her up until early part of 2009 when she started feeling the way she did. So the PET scan revealed that she had some lesions and tumors forming in her small intestine area. So what was
Oh,
happening with that blood, she was almost internally bleeding it into the bowels and losing it that
wow.
way. And so for metastatic melanoma in 2009, most of the treatments for that were done under clinical trials.
Yeah.
So that been a trip to the National Cancer Institute up at NIH in Bethesda, Maryland. So we did that. And in my book, I wrote a pretty detailed version and account of that first trip up there because that was a little bit out of our element. We're going from
Yeah.
a little quiet country life here in Calhoun County, South Carolina, to inside the Capitol Beltway. So that in itself was an experience
Yeah,
traveling.
I'm
So we went out there for a consultation, and their plan for her was to do surgery there, to go in and inspect that area and remove those small tumors. And then they were putting her on a protocol of immunotherapy. So
okay.
that's kind of how her journey began.
Yeah. What did it feel like when you first heard she had cancer?
Well, of course, it was a shock.
Yep.
But what I tried to do for her, I based my reactions kind of on her reactions. And our daily life, what I tried to do every day was just keep life as normal for her as I possibly could.
Yeah.
It wasn't us waking up and me trying to be overbearing and asking her all these questions. I just kind of let her
Right.
dictate how life was to go. So that's how I interacted with her. I mean, I was fearful for her and I was concerned. But her attitude about it from day one was pretty much, okay, tell me where to be, when to be there, and what you're going to do to me. Because she was willing to let modern medicine and the ability of doctors to give her her best shot at maybe beating it. So she never really got to where she acted like she was very fearful of or upset over it. The thing about April, her entire life since I had known her and our life together, and even through her journey of the cancer, is she had a peace that was over her about all of it because she knew that whatever God's will was for her life is what was going to happen. So
Mhm.
she just kind of day by day and said, you know what, I'm going to give it a try, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen. So we
Mhm.
tried to keep everyday life normal. Myself, along with her best friend who lives just a few hundred yards down the road, they would talk daily. And when she'd call her, she wouldn't ask her about, well, what's next for you or how are you feeling? She's like, well,
Right.
what'd you do today? She kept it normal because I
Yeah.
think a lot of times when people are faced with that, that's all they really want. They want to try to have a sense of
Yes.
normalcy as much as possible. So
Yep.
if you can at least give that to them and not overwhelm them with your own worry, it goes a long way, really.
So she had some treatments and they didn't work. And so how long was her like full cancer journey like since the diagnosis in 2009?
It was 11 months.
Oh, that's pretty short.
She went to NIH. They did a surgery on her. She had 9 lesions on her small intestine, and they were
Whoa.
fortunately they were grouped together fairly close. So they removed that section, hooked her back up, and then started the process of immunotherapy. Along the way, they discovered 3 small tumors on the brain.
Oh,
So they had to push pause on the immunotherapy, and she went in for a gamma knife radiosurgery. We did that back here in Columbia, South Carolina, and she underwent the radiation therapy for that, and it zapped them. It took them from what they were down to nothing.
wow.
And because obviously, when you hear brain, some
Right.
people really get concerned about that, but the advancements in, non-invasive brain surgery has come a long way.
Yeah.
And so it took care of that. That was a battle won.
Mhm.
When that was addressed and taken care of, out of the blue one day, she got a phone call from NIH and they said she no longer fit the protocol without a whole lot of explanation. She called back up there to try to find out, what was going on. She tried to get in touch with the oncology fellows that were handling her case, and they had since left. And the only conclusions we drew from it was back in 2009, we had a different administration take office in Washington. And from my research, a lot of funding was cut to
Oh,
federal
okay.
programs. So I don't know for sure if that's what happened. But all of a sudden, a lot of people that worked at that hospital were now gone, and some of the protocols that patients were under were stopped. And so then she was left to get back with her original oncologist that diagnosed her and put a plan in place for that. She went through a interleukin chemo treatment. That really didn't do much for her. The third thing she went on was just a chemo pill that a doctor at Carolina's Medical Center up in Charlotte administered to her for a 6 week period. That worked.
Mm.
Sat down and looked at CT images before and then after the 6 weeks was up. They gave her about 3 weeks. She went back in, had another pelvic CT done, and it was amazing the shrinkage in the tumors that you could see. So then the plan was, well, let's do another cycle of the pill.
Yeah.
So she did that, and it was in late December of 2009. She started having a lot of pain again in the abdominal area. And it got to the point where we had to take her to the emergency room because she was having bowel blockages. Anybody undergoes different types of cancer, I realize there's a lot of pain that comes with it, and they have to be put on some heavy narcotic pain relievers at
Yep.
times, which we
Yep.
all know side effects of that alone can be slower bowel
Yeah.
activities and blockages. And
Yep.
2 times prior to that, she had to go in and have an NG tube put in to pump her out.
Mm.
And that's when I kind of decided, well, maybe we need to change her diet. So
Yeah.
I kind of tailored her diet for her to where she would consume things that were more easily digestible. So along the way, we figured out a lot of things that helped her. But it was January the 4th or 5th. She was in severe pain one morning when she woke up. And I said, you know what? I think we need to go make another trip to the ER. So we went up there, and they did some more scans on her, and what started to occur, and I guess it had to be recent months too, was she was developing a tumor in the mesentery, which is a membrane that kind of holds all of your lower bowel
Mm.
organs together, and it was a fast growing one. So our oncologist consulted people across the country, and they said, well, there's one more thing you can throw at it, and some type of infused treatment, much like the interleukin was. And they basically told us, they said, if this doesn't show results, even within a week's time of a change, then we've kind of reached the end of the road with what we feel we can do for her.
Wow.
And so they tried it, and after of maybe a week, they did some more follow up scans, and it was growing.
Mm.
And she was still in the hospital. And so at that point, she was like, you know what? I have a piece about what may wind up happening to me. And all I ask is during this period is you keep me comfortable. I don't want to lay here in pain.
Right.
And she had already kind of come to terms with what might have, be ahead for her. And so it was 5.5 weeks that she remained in Lexington Medical Center. She didn't come home and be put on hospice.
Wow.
Her oncology doctor still saw her every day, and the nurses that were on the oncology floor took very good care of her during that period. And I
Mm.
guess the benefit for me was that I got to accept the fact that, okay, she's nearing the end of her life, but I've been blessed with the opportunity to spend time with her and have
Yes.
conversations with her. Many people I know, when people suddenly lose someone, they don't
Yeah.
get that chance.
Right.
There's a flip side to it as well. You're having
Yeah.
to watch them downhill every day, they deteriorate physically.
Yep.
So it's not an easy thing either.
No, it's not.
And there were moments along the way that I look back and I see how inspiring she was.
Right.
Just the peace she had that was present in her, and knowing where she was going to be going when she took her last breath. There was a day where my buddy, who's a pastor, he was there, and some members of our families were there, and we were gathered around the foot of her bed. And she was still somewhat coherent then. I mean, she took long naps, and so we're all just kind of gathered around the foot of her bed and said a prayer. And when Shane was done praying, we were just kind of looking at her for a moment. All of a sudden, she opened her eyes and she threw her hands up in the air and she said, "Today's a happy day."
Oh, wow.
And kind of shocked all of us. I mean,
Right?
we at that point, maybe she didn't even know what was going on. And in fact, she did. And then I think from that point forward, when she started to really decline and slow down, and she'd have moments where she was clear and could speak. So it was a little bit of an up and down that was happening with that.
Yeah.
And probably one of the most heartbreaking moments that I experienced with her was one night a nurse had come in to change a bag of medicine on her IV pump. And I was just kind of standing in the doorway of the room, kind of looking out into the hallway. And the nurse asked her, she said, "Well, how are you feeling right now?" And she goes, "Can you tell me something?" And the nurse said, "Sure." And she said, "Am I dying?" And the
Mm.
way she said it was almost like in a childlike manner.
Yeah.
And of course, my heart sank to the floor when I heard that. And I just kind of glanced over and looked at her. And the nurse said, "Yeah, honey, you are, but everything's going to be okay." And April was
Wow.
said back to her, she said, "I know." And of course,
Oh.
at that time, I had to go take a lap around the hospital.
Yeah.
Not an easy moment for me.
That's so hard.
So we were able to spend time together. I was there a lot of nights with her. The nights that I didn't stay at the hospital in her room, my mother did sometimes. Her sister would come and stay with her. So we had it all worked out to where I could kind of still keep things on track at home and keep my business going.
Yeah.
And she always told me, she said, "You need to go take care of this, and you don't need to be sitting up here with me all day long." One moment I really remember was one night we're sitting there, and I thought she was in a deep sleep, and she said, she looked over at me and she said, "Hey, what are you doing here?" I said, "What do you mean, what am I doing here? I'm here most every night." She goes, "Why?" I said, "Because I'm trying to spend as much time with you as I can." She said, "You should be out living your life." She said, "Why are you here? This can't be any fun for you." And I was like, "April, come on." I said, "I know you're heavily medicated right now, but
Yeah.
I'm here because I want to be here." She said, "Well, I just don't think this is fair to you." And I kind of took that as that was her way of letting me know that everything was going to be okay, and that at some point down the road, she wanted me to be able to continue living and
Yeah.
move on in whatever way I could. So
Mhm.
it's kind of some of the things that happened during that 5.5 week period. I've described it when asked by people. If I talk about it, I say I felt like I was hanging on a rope over a cliff,
Yeah.
and I knew the rope was going to pop. And every day it was fraying a little more and a little more. And then all of a sudden, on the evening of February 13th of 2010 is when it popped, and that's when she took her last.
Were you
But I
able to
knew
be
she did
with
it with
her?
peace in her heart, and she knew.
Yeah.
I had actually been there for most of the day and afternoon, and her sister had come in to spend that night with her. And she told me, she said, "You need to go home and get some rest. I'm gonna stay with her
Mhm.
too." And I think I had gotten home, maybe 10 minutes went by because we lived about an hour away from the hospital.
Wow.
And I was home maybe 10 minutes, and the phone rang, and it was her sister Dee Dee, and she said, "She's gone."
Mm.
So she was at
Such
least,
a Go ahead. What'd you say?
she had her sister there with her.
Yes.
So then I left and went straight back, of course, and she was still in her hospital room.
Yeah. And tell me what that moment was like for you. Like, I know it's very strange seeing the body without the soul. Like, what was that like for you?
It is, and it was a little bit of a 50-50 with me because I was saddened that she was not there, but I also had some peace come over me because her battle
Right.
had she had won the
Yes.
battle finally, and she was not
Yes.
laying there, suffering from it and not being able to live her life. And then I remember walking out of the hospital not that night thinking, okay, I'm gonna have to figure it out on my own right now, but at least I know that she's somewhere right now we can only imagine.
Right. You have that
Just
piece of,
the peace and calm came over me pretty quick.
right. Yeah, it's such a mixed feeling. It's like we're so heartbroken and sad, but they're in a place we can't even imagine, and they're good. They're good. They're not in pain anymore. They're running around, just like it's such a bittersweet time because for our sake, we wish they were here. But for their sake, they're great,
Right.
So I found that such a conflicting time and like, okay, yeah, the battle's over. I love how you explain that, the rope. That's like a beautiful way to explain it. I always explained it that I was like standing on a train track knowing a train was coming. I didn't know when, but it was about to hit me. Same kind of concept, like I don't know. And also that's how I had anticipatory grief explained to me, like we have grief before they die because we know it's coming. And just that whole thing. Would walk us through like the very beginning. You go home from the hospital. Like what's life like as a new widower? How old were you at that time?
I was 35.
Okay, so young adult.
April was 18 months older than me, so had she lived about 1 month longer, she would have been 37. So she was still
Okay, so
37.
very young. Yeah, so you come home and what's life like for you then?
Well, being that I had 5.5 weeks of, to be able to sometimes come home and have
Yeah.
the silence in the house, I was already starting to kind of gently adjust to that. And the only thing I had at home was I had an overgrown 120-pound chocolate lab,
Wow.
and she was there, but they don't talk to us,
Yeah,
but their
exactly.
presence is still there. So I still had that. So I was able to adjust a little by little during that period.
Right.
Then there were nights when I'm like, okay, the silence is deafening,
Yep.
and you miss that. Even if someone's just their presence in the room with you, even if they weren't even
Right.
speaking. There were often
Yep.
times when we were at home at night, and she may be sitting there reading, and but she was there.
Right. Yes.
But I think people have asked me, how did I have so much peace over it? And I think what it is that it's the gift that's given to us as part of the Trinity that God has. You have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So the
Yep.
entire time that I went through that journey with her, and even spending those nights that were very horrific to me and watching her decline, it was like there was a certain amount of peace there because that Holy Spirit was with me every day. It may not have been
Yes.
every day that I was maybe on my knees praying constantly, but I felt
Yep.
the presence. And so I continued to feel that when I was at home.
Yeah.
And I started making adjustments. One of my good friends that I had met through my boat racing days, he called me every day. And we would spend sometimes an hour or two on the phone talking about all sorts of things. And then he suggested to me, he probably gave me the best advice for therapy at the time. And he said, you know what you need to do? He said, you need to hook the boat up this spring and you need to meet up with me. And
Mm.
we need to go travel and we need to run a full racing series. And he said, it'll get you out of the
Yes.
house. And I said, you know what? That's what we're going to do. So the summer that followed her death in 2010, that's what I did. I was home during the week. I was working, taking care of, everything around my house. Fortunately, I had been domesticated a long time ago, so I wasn't like a lot of people where they're left to say, well, how do I do this and how do I
Yes.
do that? So I
Totally.
felt like that was a blessing too.
Yeah.
And I think like I managed it really well. There were times I obviously missed her,
Yeah.
but I think it was still that peace in knowing that she was no longer having to battle what she did because it took its toll on her. So I just kind of kept on the go and stayed active. Spent time with friends. Got on an airplane one day and flew to Dallas for a cousin's wedding. Anything I could do,
Yeah.
I did. I didn't have a child to take care of, and I had someone who could come in and take care of the animals while I.
Yeah.
That was kind of how I moved forward in the beginning from all that.
Right. Right. So you were doing your boat stuff again and getting out there. And then when was it that you became open to dating again?
At first I didn't have any desire to. I
Right.
just
No.
wanted to kind of finding myself again because along
Yeah.
the way we form these identities that we have with different people in our life.
Yeah.
You're so used to certain things that you do, and I didn't really have any. There was no rush in me. I didn't feel like there was any pressure to get out and start dating. So it wasn't. I didn't wait a long time, but it wasn't like immediately. And I went out to dinner with some friends one night, and one of the guys that asked me, this was on into the latter part of 2010, he asked me if I had any interest in dating or meeting anybody. And I said, well, sometimes I think about it,
Yeah.
not yet. Of course, he made the suggestion to me to get on a particular dating site.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, no, I don't think that's for me. And a little bit more time went by, and I was sitting around one evening. I'm like, you know what? What I got to lose? Maybe I'll just go try and see what it's about.
Right. Yep.
So that's what I did. It was the only time I ever did it, and will remain the only time I've ever done it. Not for me, but I did. I did meet my second, or who was going to become my second wife. I did meet her.
Okay. So tell us about that story.
It was a different experience for me because even years prior, I knew April from childhood, and
Right.
even in school years, I mean, I dated girls in high school. Never really got serious about anyone in high school, but I never met anyone online, other than people that were in the same interest groups of me when it came to the boating stuff.
Yeah.
I met. They were all guys that raced boats along with me,
Yeah.
but I never felt like anybody to go on a date. So I tried it, and it was a little bit overwhelming to begin with.
Uh-huh.
I
Yep.
described it to someone. I said it's kind of like window shopping for women because you're going
Yeah.
through all these profiles. And
You're swiping, yes.
so anyway, I ran across. So I ran across one evening, and I was interested in what she had written. You know how it works if you've ever
Yep.
done that.
I have.
And so we got to talking for a while, and I remember I was in Kentucky one weekend at a boat race, and I was texting her the night I got in from the daily events. And I said, you know what, when I get back, maybe next weekend or later on in the week, we can finally meet and have a date.
Mm-hmm.
And we had been talking for probably about a month. And so that's kind of how I began my life with her.
And what's her name?
Her name is Cheryl.
Cheryl. Okay.
And so we ended up, we had a date, and one date turned into two and more, and we started seeing one another. And of course, getting to know her throughout the process, she learned a lot about me, and we talked
Mm-hmm.
openly about the life I had had with April, and she was very curious
Yep.
at times her journey she had gone on. So she kind of
Mm-hmm.
knew down to every detail of what April had to endure with her cancer journey. But
Mm-hmm.
so
Wait, so was Cheryl widowed as well?
Cheryl was not widowed. She had a
Oh, okay.
she had a 2.5-year-old little boy when I met her. His name was Noah.
Mm.
And you could say that my life and how it began with her was not really what you had planned on happening. Long story
Right.
short, with that, after probably about a good year into us dating, she got pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
We ended up getting married a month after my daughter was born, but she
Mm.
gave birth to my one and only biological child, Faith. When people, I know we might mention my book is titled 2 Days on a Calendar. And one of those days is kind of a 50-50 meaning for me. because April passed away on February the 13th of 2010. My daughter Faith was born on February the 13th of 2012.
Oh,
So two
wow.
years later, she was born on that day. It wasn't planned. It all happened naturally. And I remember my mother, when she got to the hospital that day, she asked me, she said, "Son, how do you feel about her being born on this day?" And it
Yeah.
was a simple response to me. And I said, "Mom, 2 years ago on today, the angel that I knew my wife to be went to heaven." And I said, "Today, God's sending me one."
That's
So
beautiful.
she was born on that day. And, we came home prior to Cheryl giving birth to Faith. Had a house fire. House caught fire December of
Wow.
2011. We were in the process of handling all that. Right after Faith was born, we were in a rental house. So we rebuilt the house that I'm in now, same location as the original one, and ended up moving back in it in December of 2012. So started a life again as a dad
Yeah.
and a stepdad.
Mhm.
And I can say this, Cheryl and April could not have really been more polar opposite in their
Yeah.
personalities. Life with them was drastically different.
Mhm. I get that.
And she was a stay-at-home mom. She homeschooled both Noah and Faith. And it wasn't until about, I'm going to say maybe around the same part of the year that April started experiencing what she did back in 2009. But it was now 2008. Cheryl started feeling some things that were different and ended up having to go in and get some things checked. And then she also received a diagnosis of cancer as well. And that was a
Whoa, what
day.
kind of
She actually was diagnosed with cervical cancer.
wow.
She was having some different sensations and some pain in her abdominal and pelvic
Mhm.
areas. And Cheryl was a bit stubborn when it came to modern medicine. She was not one to just freely go and have checkups like she should have. But it got to the point where she didn't really have much of a choice. And she went in and they were doing a type of ultrasound on her. And she started hemorrhaging during that
Wow.
ultrasound, which led to her being taken down to a local hospital. And they found what they found. They did a biopsy
Mhm.
on it, which was she had a malignant mass on her cervix.
Wow.
And oncology was called in for her to come and have a consultation appointment. I think they felt originally like what they wanted to do was do some surgery on her and follow it up with either a radiation protocol or a possible chemo protocol. But they
Yeah.
gave her pretty good odds when you compare what she was diagnosed with April. Two drastically different things.
Right.
April had kind of the odds stacked against her. Cheryl, not so much, but she was kind of resistant to it. She did not, I think it was out of fear. She did not want to have surgery and she did not want to have any treatment. She chose a totally different, she wanted to go down that road, the naturalist, type holistic type healing, which was kind of foreign to me because I just 9 years prior saw a different, path to that. So that was a big adjustment for me. I think part of it, her knowing the details of April's journey and knowing obviously that she didn't survive it, probably manifested even more fears in her. Like, well, am I going to go through what she went through, and then the end result be the same? So I
Yeah.
think that's what was in her mind the whole time. So it was a
When
big.
you heard her, sorry, when you heard her cancer diagnosis, were you like in disbelief? Like, really? Another wife with cancer? Or what were
If
you?
I go back right now to sitting in that doctor's office, it was an OBGYN that was there when they did the ultrasound and she started hemorrhaging, which they were able to get that under control in that office that day before we took her to the hospital. He just point blank came out and said, "Miss Chapman, I think you have cervical cancer." And when I heard that, you could have plucked me out of the chair with a feather. I mean,
Mhm.
it was the most surreal moment, yet it was real. And I'm going, what? Again? Is this even, And even Cheryl looked at me in her own state of shock of hearing it, and it was like, I could feel her feeling what I would, what must have been feeling as well.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, you know what? If this is what it's going to be, I'm gonna remain just like I was with the other one. I'm gonna be there and try to keep
Yeah.
life as normal as I can for her as well. But obviously, her journey with it was drastically different, and it did
Right. So
lead
she
to
didn't.
some things that she would ask me. She asked me one time. She said, "Do you believe God will heal me from this?"
Mm,
I said, "I believe He can you, and whatever His will for you will be done." And she actually got a little angry with me when I said that. She said, "No, you're supposed to believe 100% that He is going to heal me." And of course, I said, "Well," I said, "Cheryl, remember 9 years ago what I lived through, and it could have gone either way." So it wasn't easy at all. It was a thing of, wow, history is in fact repeating itself.
yeah.
And along the way, I started to see some of the same pattern. And then ultimately, it was like, okay, it looks like I'm going to be facing this again, but from a
Yeah.
different place than I was before. Because then I had a stepson, who lived with us, and my daughter, who at the time was
Right. It's different
approaching
with kids.
7 years old.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, much different.
Mm-hmm. A lot different with kids. And so she went the natural route, so there was no chemo or anything. What was that like, her journey with cancer?
Excuse me. She had days where I think she had kind of convinced herself that some of the things that she was doing, as far as certain foods she would eat, and think she was following some people online who had claimed that they did this
Right.
and it cured them.
Uh,
But I think, whenever we go looking for a result a particular way about something, we can find that result, right?
Yep.
And
True.
sometimes it doesn't take a whole lot of convincing for someone to believe, okay, if I just do this for this period of time, it's going to work.
Yeah.
So she had her good moments and bad. I mean, there were days where she dealt with a lot of pain, and she was never one to take anything heavily, pain wise. I mean, I've seen her at times struggle all day with a headache because she didn't want to take an ibuprofen, to ease her headache. She was very resistant to things. But being that she did not have any additional CT scans or never had a PET scan, all it was originally was a biopsy. We didn't really know what was going on.
Right.
And I firmly believe to this day that it probably had metastasized and got in other areas,
Hmm.
because when someone doesn't go back in and have any follow ups done, you don't know if it's progressing or whether it's
Right.
stable
Yeah,
or you
that's hard.
have any proof of it. And so I just
Mm-hmm.
kind of had to go along with the program and still remain as supportive as I could. But it was a different experience for me. And Cheryl was a very private person. She didn't want a whole lot of people knowing she was even dealing with it. So all of
Wow.
the support that I had from all of the people, friends and family from years ago, 90% of them were in the dark about it and didn't even know it was happening.
That's hard.
She didn't want anybody to know.
Wow.
There was only some close people to us and family members that actually knew, what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And our marriage was a little bit of a fluctuation too. A lot of times when you lose someone, and you look back and there's still some unresolved issues on the table,
Mm-hmm.
affects how you handle the grief from it. And of course, there are things we can do, of course, even though they're no longer here, to try to process that and work yourself through it. And even as in recent months, I've had to really look back on some things that I needed to really deal with in those issues, in the marriage. But
Mm-hmm.
she had an up and down experience with it. And in January of 2019, it was either the fourth or the fifth. It was another thing. April went in the hospital. It was either the fourth or the fifth. Cheryl, it was
Same
two
thing.
more
Yeah.
consecutive days. What happened? She got what we ended up finding out when she went into the hospital is that mass had grown so large that it constricted her ureters and ended up putting her in renal failure
Oh,
and made her very, very ill. And they didn't discover that until they did a pelvic CT scan on her when she was in the emergency.
wow.
And that was another time for me where I felt like, okay, history's repeating itself again. Here we are, basically same time of year. It's nine
Yeah, it's
years
crazy.
later, different circumstances, of course. And the hardest thing for me through all of it was not only was I currently living through it with her, but I felt like I was reliving it
Oh, I'm sure.
from 9 years prior. And
Yeah,
because there were some similarities there, the hospital room, different hospitals, but the environment
right.
was the.
Yep.
So there were some nights for me that I don't know how I really got through them. I guess it was still that Holy Spirit sitting beside me, and I'm
Mhm.
like, yeah, I've done what I could do. I'm
Yeah.
here. I'm here with her. Um, but yeah, there's still some things that haunt me from that time period in my life.
Mhm. Yeah. So this time you're taking kids through it. How were the kids doing when
Well,
she was sick?
they of course she had a lot of talks with them at home and told them what was going on with her. So they knew that she was not. They knew that she was battling this. Then when she was in the hospital, my they were staying with my mother and my stepfather, only about 10 minutes away from the hospital. And the thing about that was throughout our marriage, Cheryl Cheryl always wanted to keep those kids real close to her. She was one that you could say did attachment parenting.
Yeah.
And my 8 years with her, seven of them, or close to seven of them, being in the marriage, we never had a night where she just said, "Okay, let's take the kids to your mother's and let's go to dinner."
Really? You guys never
Which
got
was
to go on dates?
it was very hard for me because I'm the type I wanted to date,
Yeah.
I wanted to still do the things that I did when we were married or when we were dating,
Yeah.
and when I never got that opportunity,
Yeah.
and I had to accept a lot of things, and I had to give up on. It's kind of that thing where there are battles you're not going to win,
Yeah.
so you just kind of let go of it and accept it for what it is. So when
Mhm.
she was admitted into the hospital that day, my mom and my stepdad came and were there in the waiting area with the kids, and then they had to end up taking them home, which was a different experience for everyone. And even
Right.
though they had never been around them a lot over the years, they had never spent a night away from home. And there's another thing where I think God's presence made the difference because when we were waiting on an ambulance to come pick her up from the house, I walked out into my driveway and I just said a little prayer and I said, God, your will needs to be done and will be done in this situation. I said, but if I could ask anything, it's just to put a blanket of protection around those children because they're getting
Mm.
ready to do some things that they've never had to before.
Yeah.
And knowing that they were more than likely going to have to go home with my mom and my stepdad and spend a night away from home. Maybe there were some fears with that. So yeah, they came and they ended up taking them home. And then a couple hours later, my mom sent me a video and they were running around and having a ball. They were enjoying being with them.
Yeah. That's good.
They were being protected. And of course, they got to come to the hospital as often as they could and spend time with their mother. I would go and get them on a Friday and bring them to the hospital and a little bit of time with them. Cheryl had a sister that didn't live very far from us, and she would usually spend Friday nights at the hospital with her. I'd bring the kids home, bring them back into their environment they were used to, and tell them, "What do y'all want to do? There's no limitations on what you want to do tonight. You want to stay up all night long? We can. We can go to dinner. We can have dinner here." So it's kind of putting some normal back in their life as
Yeah.
often as I. And then Saturday mornings I would take them up there and they'd spend a couple hours with her, and then go back to my mom's house and stay with her.
Yeah. Well, it's so hard. It is so different going through it with kids. It's a whole different world because it's like you have your own grief and they have their grief and it's
Yes,
it's hard, but in some ways I think really good because it keeps you going and you have to keep living life for your kids and it is a whole different situation. So then tell us about like her passing and what that was like.
Well, the biggest difference that occurred, um, when you compare her last 5.5 weeks to April's, which there were moments when she did have peace, but then there were moments when she did have a lot of turmoil going on in her.
Yeah.
I think she was starting to face the facts and the regrets of not allowing modern medicine maybe to give her a chance at things.
Yeah.
And I remember, it was another situation I guess I was fortunate to have because I had the time to spend with her. There were opportunities for us to have those conversations. Some of the things that were unresolved between us, we were able to find resolution to. Probably one of the most painful things to hear her say one night was she told me, she said, "You know what, Michael, now that I know that your mom is taking such good care of my kids and they're over there having fun and enjoying their life and she's keeping them entertained." She said, "When I get out of this hospital and I beat this, you and I are taking those kids to your mom's and we're
Mm,
going on a trip together."
right.
And of course, me knowing what the reality of the
Yeah.
situation was, it was almost like I could feel the knife going right through my heart
Yeah.
because it was something that I had wanted to hear from her for so long.
Yeah.
I was hearing it at a time where it was not going to come to fruition.
Oh, that's so hard.
Yeah. And so, yeah, there were nights where I was there in her room, and it was almost as if when I would look at her laying in that bed, it was almost as if I was seeing April lay there as well because they had
Right.
physical features that were the same, their skin tone was the same, their hair color was similar. And there were nights I'd have to go and I'd stand and just peer out the window over the parking lot and just uncontrollably I would just be sobbing because it was like I knew what was coming with her.
Yep.
It was inevitable, barring a miracle. And then all of the emotions and the return of grief from 9 years ago were now starting to come back present in me. And
Hmm.
the weight of that some nights was almost unbearable.
I'm sure. Yeah.
And then I caught myself at times, it was almost like there were so many things I was just reliving.
Yeah.
And not only in the present, but from the past. And then one morning I was on the phone with my mother, kind of updating her on the night before. And I mistakenly called Cheryl by April's name because it was both situations present in my mind. And because she said, "Son, you just called her April." And I'm like, "Did I?" And she's like, "I understand." She said, "I understand why." And then, at that point, people that were unaware of the situation that had been with her and her illness and her hospitalization, people now knew the
Yeah.
word when I got now. So the same people who were there and supported me all those years ago had come back to do it again. So
Right.
that was kinda helpful to me. But it was a different experience. I wanted Cheryl to have just as much peace in her that April had.
Yeah.
But there were moments where she did. Cheryl was saved. She was a Christian, so she knew where she was going.
Right.
Plagued her mind the most was she knew she was going to be leaving children behind.
Yeah. That's a
You know, and being that they were the age they were young. I mean, Faith was almost 7 and Noah was almost 11. He's 4 years older than her. So they
hmm
were and wondering what was going to happen in our daily lives afterwards. I mean, she had been homeschooling them, so there was a big role she played in their life in addition to being their
Yeah.
mother. She was their teacher.
Right.
So a lot of things were unsettling with her, and there were moments where I kind of took the heat from things and even frustrations that she had. Just had to absorb it
Yeah.
and be there for her.
hmm
But it was not an easy time for me at all, and it was just like, wow, I never imagined going through it twice, but
Right.
being drastically different the
Yeah.
second go around. But hey, it's one of those things. I guess I firmly believe now that everything that we experience in life does happen for reasons.
Yeah.
But you know,
Hard. Were you with her when she passed?
Well, it was another situation where uh, the night before she passed away, I was sitting in her room by her bed. I had moved that chair. One thing I mentioned in my book, when you're in a hospital, is there's always a chair in the room. I think the most
Yeah.
demented mind on earth designs that chair.
Yeah. They're not
You
comfortable.
know, yeah. And so, but I slid it up close to the bed, and for several nights in a row when I was there, I'd just sit there and I'd hold her hand and listen to her breathing change. And I was mentally and physically exhausted, of course, could not sleep hardly at all, in the hospital. And the nurse that was on shift that night came in and she looked at me and she said, "Honey, you look like you don't have much energy or anything left in you." And she said, "You look exhausted." I said, "Well, I
Yeah.
am." She said, "Well, you need to maybe take a little bit of time and focus on you." She said, let me let you in on something. She said, "I've been doing this a long time, and a lot of times when our loved ones are there and in the state she's in right now, sometimes they just need to be by themselves,
Yep.
and it's something that kind of naturally occurs." And she said, "If you don't step away and go recharge even for the evening, you may wind up here in one of these beds and one of these floors, having to go through something yourself." She said, "So I'm just giving you the best advice I can." And I said, "Let me think about it a minute." I said, "Because I really don't want to leave her." And so I was sitting there for another hour or two battling myself. Only she came back in again and she said, "Have you thought a little bit more about what I told you?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." I said, "I think I'm going to at least go for a walk. I may go for a drive." She said, "How far away do you live?" I said, "It's about 20 minutes." She said, "Maybe you should go home and go to sleep. You come back in the morning." I said, "Okay." So I left the hospital room. I walked around a little bit. I got in my car. I said, "Well, I'll go for a drive." Well, that drive turned into the drive all the way home. And we had a little dog named Ziggy. And I came in and I took him out on a leash and I'm walking around. It's like four, maybe 3 or 4 in the morning. It was late when I left. We go outside for a little bit. We come back inside. I get in a recliner and he hops in my lap and I went to sleep. And at about 6:30 the next morning, the 12th of February, phone rang, and it was one of the head nurses from the hospital saying that she had taken her last breath at around
Hmm.
6 to 6:30, somewhere in that way.
Wait, isn't that almost the same date
It's
as
the
the day before, as your first wife's, as April's death and your daughter's birthday? Is the 13th and then her death is the 12th?
12th.
Wow. Wow.
Because all along I'm thinking, as the weeks go by, what was in my mind? February 13th is coming fast.
Right.
And I'm like, surely it's not going to be that same
The
day.
same day. And it
You know,
wasn't, but very close.
like if it has to be, can it be before or after? And so it was 6 something in the morning on the 12th. And knowing
Wow.
that I could have handled it had the 13th been just the day, the anniversary of April's passing. Had Cheryl left on that same day, that would have been fine. But the fact that it was also our daughter's birthday,
Yeah.
that part of it that I was not really wanting to accept as a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Came in, it was the day before. And so they called me and they asked me some questions about things and we were going to go on and move her out of the room. I said, "Well, I'll be up there, and just as soon as I can get there." And of course, when I got to the hospital, they had already moved her.
Mm.
And so I just spent some time and I gathered up all her personal belongings and placed them in her bags that she had in there. And I sat on the bed for a little bit. And I was like, wow. It just kind of all hit me at once. I'm like, it was one of the most surreal moments I'd ever had in my life, yet I was faced with the reality of this is a real thing.
Yeah.
And now I'm left to move forward yet again, but in a different way because there was faith, my daughter, and then Noah. And there were still some questions that had to be answered about him and what his future was going to be
Right.
and his dad. So anyway, I kind of did what I always did. I grabbed the bags, I stood up, and I kind of shook it off, and I walked out of the hospital. And to this day, I haven't been back to that same hospital.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And went immediately to my mom's house and sat down with the kids to tell them what had happened. Because a few weeks prior, my buddy Shane, who's a pastor that was there when April was in the hospital, he and I went and sat down with the kids and kind of told them, look, you know your mom's sick. She's in the hospital. And we tried to get them to understand it from the standpoint of sometimes God's way of healing people is to bring them to Him.
Yeah.
And they had a real clear understanding of that because she had planted the seeds in them pretty early in their lives about, our life in Christ. Part of the homeschool curriculum was a Bible course. So they kind of knew, what was coming. They just obviously didn't know the time frame.
Right.
I went to my mom's house and I sat them down and I told them, and of course they got teary eyed and upset for a little bit, but then 30 minutes later they went right back to being normal kids.
Right.
Probably one of the most resilient things I've ever seen, but let's face it, kids sometimes can be because they haven't lived through all the things that we have as adults,
Yeah.
so they don't have anything to compare it to.
Right.
So, I left them there with my mom. They stayed a few more days at mom's house so I could just kind of come home,
Yeah.
catch my breath, and start figuring out what the next step was going to be, planning what we were going to do as far as, you know, a memorial service or anything
Mm.
for Cheryl. She was needed. So we spent the next couple of days kind of putting a plan together as to what we would do and decided we would have just like a visitation where people could come in and see us and extended came in. And we had it at the church that I grew up in with April because my
Wow.
parents went to that church, and my mother was taking Faith and Noah, to church with her during that period they were staying with her.
Yeah.
The people at church said, well, you're more than welcome to have something here. And probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to do as well was the night of her visitation. We had a table set up over to the right of the center of the aisle of the church. Put some pictures of her on it, pictures of family, kids. My mom had a flower arrangement done and put in the center of the table. And I'm standing up at the front of the church, and it's a Baptist church. I've got the table that sits in front of the pulpit. And my mother walked up to me and she said, son, she whispered in my ear. She said, son, I don't know if you realize this, but the flowers that are on the table behind you, she said, do you know why they are there? And I turned around, I looked at him, I said, no. She said, well, you know that April's dad, who was still a member of that church,
Mm.
every year approaching the anniversary, the Sunday was the closest to the anniversary of her death. He put flowers in the church in memory.
Wow. Wow.
It kind of hit me again.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, I'm standing here with flowers behind me and flowers to the right of me, and the significance of both of them was a bit
Yeah.
overwhelming. And I was very close to just losing it
I'm sure.
right then and there. And then I remember looking down and standing right there next to me, and I'm like, no, I got this. I got this. It's going to be okay. And
Wow.
I kept standing there. Everybody in the line had come and gone, and then we were kind of left to pick up the pieces yet again and move forward in a different way.
Yeah, with kids this time. So did Noah end up staying with you?
Well, another thing that was different about my life with Cheryl was, you know how when you meet someone, you get to know them, and you know they've got a past, and you want to believe everything they tell you, right?
Mm-hmm.
She had kind of kept him from his father for a number of years, you know, and of course told me why. And so I kind of had it in my mind, okay, well, maybe he's what she says he is, and maybe he's not. So I knew I was going to be faced with the fact, okay, at some point I'm going to have to reach out to him.
Yeah.
And for a couple of years prior to her getting ill, she had reached out to him herself and was opening up the doors of communication again to try to build back some things and maybe build some trust back to
Yeah.
where they could possibly be a part of one another's life. And then that kind of got put on hold for a little bit when she got sick. So about a week went by and I was able to get in touch with him via Facebook, and I sent him a message and told him what had happened. And he told me he had heard about it. And I said, well, I'd like to kind of at some point have a conversation with you because obviously we got some things we need to talk about when it
Right.
comes to, you know. And so, long story short, with that, after a series of phone conversations and then he and I meeting in person, my impression of him was nothing at all about what, what I was made to believe.
Yeah.
And I don't know why it was like that. It was one of those things in life we're not ever going to get answers to certain questions in life.
Right.
But throughout he and I getting to know each other in a very short period of time, so that I felt like I could trust him, uh, revealed some things in his life that he had with her, albeit much shorter than the one I had. They paralleled one another. Very similar things had happened.
Yeah.
So we kind of felt like, okay, yeah, I get you. Yeah, you get me. So we kind of just put a plan in motion to kind of gingerly introduce Noah back into the concept of spending time with his father because he was 2 years old
Wow.
whenever they parted. And so he really had no memory of him.
Yeah.
And another blessing that came from that is it all kind of went relatively smooth. You know, the first visit, which involved myself and him and his dad, just a couple hours one afternoon at a dock near the lake here. They had some interaction. That kind of progressed into them spending a day together, then spending a weekend together. And so we had determined as the summer went by, the summer of 2019, everyone was starting to get comfortable with the new adjustments. And of course, he wanted to have him with him. He
Yeah.
wanted to move in with him, and he lived about an hour away. So we made preparations for that, and we packed him up. And his dad came up on a Saturday, and we loaded up everything we possibly could that he needed to take with him. And they drove out the driveway, and off he was to start a new life with his dad, who he was just now really getting to know over the course of a couple of months. And he had an older sister that he barely remembered from back then.
Huh.
On his dad's side, he had a sister. It was, and we made the plan too that okay, we're gonna try to get him and Faith together as often as possible. We're gonna set up
Right.
means that they can communicate with one another and try to keep their brother sister bond that they had going. And Faith seemed to adjust to it fairly well. She would miss her brother, but they were polar opposite personalities as well. He was
Yeah.
very quiet and introverted. She's very loud and extroverted, so she would exhaust him quick.
Yeah.
So I think maybe he may have even looked at it like, well, I get a break from her.
Huh.
But everything kind of adjusted well, and he was able to start his life down there in a new environment, started school, and then of course I was not going to homeschool Faith. I had already said nope.
Yeah.
I am not cut out for that.
Yeah.
I went to a local private school in a town nearby and talked with the headmaster of the school about maybe enrolling her there. They tested her. She was right where she needed to be for her grade level. So she started the second grade that fall at a school that she's continued to be at. And her life is different. She's been able to get out and enjoy being who she really needs to be. She's been involved with different things over the past 6 years. She's done cheering, she's done softball,
Nice.
volleyball. Her Aunt Jennifer, her mom's sister, has made the statement. She said, well, she's living her life out loud right now.
Mm.
And so happy to see that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's kind of how life Of course, in my book, I go through much more details about
Right.
all my early life, my life with April, the things you and I have just talked about. That book takes us all the way up to, I finished it in the fall of last year.
Mm-hmm.
So it covers a little bit of everything from the time I was created all the way up until last year,
Right.
and how my life is now. Here I am, a dad who's raising a 13-year-old daughter, and coming from a guy who was an only child. So I never was
Mm.
even with a sister.
Wow.
It's been a learning curve for me,
Yeah, I'm sure.
but what we've done pretty good.
That's good. Well, we don't have a lot of time left, but I want to go into really quick. What inspired you to write your book and tell us a little bit more about your book?
After Cheryl passed away in 2019, I think my way of venting some of my emotions and feelings was I'd take to Facebook and I'd make really long posts,
Yeah.
just let you know my experience, sharing it with people. And I started getting feedback on some of the things I would simply write on there, and people say, "You
Yeah.
need maybe this has brought you to a point in life where you can write your story." A lot of people kind of had an appreciation for how I maybe worded things. I had
Yeah.
an aunt. She said, "You write like one of my favorite authors." And she said, "I really would like to see you write a book one day."
Yeah.
So, after some encouragement in that, um, I started in December of 2020 writing it. And of course, I took some long breaks from it
Yeah.
and didn't really finish it until the fall of last year, because I was still living life, and I figured, well, there's a time maybe when I get through living some more and learning some more things that I could maybe articulate in the end parts of it, then it'll all come together in good timing. And someone who I was dating at the time, who had also had a very similar past as I had, she started authoring a book as well while we were dating, and it kind of inspired me to go on and finish. And so her book and my book released on Amazon 2 days apart
Well,
last October. So
yeah. And can you tell everybody what the book is called? And we'll put a link to it as well.
the title of the book, for the ones who are watching, this is 2 days, 2 days on a calendar, signifying the 12th and the 13th of February mainly.
Yeah.
And it is available exclusively through Amazon Books. I went through KDP,
Yeah. That's
and
awesome.
in the process of doing a follow up book right now,
Great.
where I'm just what based on my experiences and how I've handled the grief of things, and even in the dating world that I've been in the last 6 years, I kind of
Yeah.
feel like in the last 6 years of my life, I've lived more than I ever did before.
Mm.
I've had some experiences that I kind of would like to share with people, and the
Yeah.
breaking down of some of the emotions felt not only from the past through the illnesses and the deaths, but things that I've experienced in the past 6 years.
Well, that's great.
I'm going to call it's going to be titled Grace in the Grief, because I feel
Good.
like there's grace in the grief, and that you just
Yeah.
have to know where to find it.
Yeah. Yeah. One more question. What advice would you give to a brand new widow since you've been through this twice? And when I say widow, I mean widower as well.
One thing that when I've had the opportunities to try to maybe express that to people is something that I feel like everyone has to go through in their own way. Now, you obviously have people that will weigh in and give you advice, give you encouragement. Some of them will give their opinions on it. And then, of course, you have the professional help. You have the grief counseling.
Yep.
I think it kind of fits differently for everyone.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to you're gonna have to give yourself a lot of grace in moments, because there are going to be times when maybe you may make mistakes. You may try to move on too fast from things. And in the case with me, some things I've had to come to terms with in recent months is there were parts of me that had not fully healed
Yeah.
from to the past, and maybe some things that maybe particularly from my second marriage, that under the surface there were some things that I had not fully healed from with that, that put
Yeah.
certain triggers in me, which
Mm-hmm.
of what happened in a recent relationship that I was in, and how things kind of ended with us. But
Mm.
just to try to, I wrote a long on Facebook back in January of 23 on what I felt about grief and how people just need to be patient with themselves,
Yes.
work through it in their own way, and what works for some doesn't always work for everyone.
Yeah.
And along the way, you're going to find those moments where, yeah, the waves of it are going to hit you, but the waves generally will settle. And to add to that, I think anybody, when they get to a point where they're ready to move on with their life, is to really make sure that you have healed from certain things. And because you don't want to go and start over and then have things come up that are going to affect you and another person, which could lead to what you think is a very healthy relationship where you have all these future plans and dreams. And then sometimes things just don't go the way you intend for them to go. And the triggers are there, and it just leads to things you just don't want to have happen.
Yeah. Well, that's good advice. Well, I'd love to close this by praying for you. Would that be okay?
Sure.
All right. God,
Yes.
I just thank you so much for Michael. Thank you for his willingness to be here and share his story. That can be hard to do sometimes. But I just pray that you continue to heal anything that needs to be healed. And I pray blessings over Faith and Noah, that you continue to heal their hearts as well and bring great people into their lives and pray for their futures. I just thank you for every listener today. I just pray that you continue to heal their broken hearts. And I just pray that they take something away from this today and get some inspiration that if Michael can do it, they can do it too. And we just thank you for all you've done. Amen. Well, thank
Amen.
you, Michael, for sharing today. And we'll make sure we have a link to your book so people can go check that out. And we really appreciate you being here today and sharing so much wisdom from being through this twice and offering people just hope that it's not always going to hurt as bad as the beginning, because that's, to me, in the beginning, that was what I was just like. I knew a few widows. I called them all. I'm like, please tell me it doesn't stay like this forever. That's all I need to know, because it was so
Right.
horrible. And you've been through it twice, so that's pretty amazing that you're able to share that with us. So anyways, well, listeners, if you have not joined our Widow Too Soon community, please do that. There's links in the show notes if you want to be on the podcast and want to be a guest, just like Michael was. You just fill out an application and we'll get you on the calendar. So thank you, everyone, for being here today, and we'll see you next time. Bye.